I have a box in my closet I do not open very often. Ticket stubs, mostly. A couple of 45s with the sleeves gone soft at the corners. And every time I do open it, I think the same thing. There are songs in here that were everywhere once. Number one in the country, on every radio and every car. And now? Now they're gone. Not out of print. Not unavailable. Just gone from the conversation.
The one side is the least you can do. Beatniks and politics.
So I went looking for 10 of them. And what I found underneath these songs, the stories, the accidents, the people who got left out of their own hits, I was not ready for it. If you remember these, you were there. And I think you already know which one is going to hurt. Number 10. Time Won't Let Me, The Outsiders. 1966 12-string guitar. Then those horns come in over the top of it. And I remember being a kid and not understanding how one band could sound like the Beatles and Motown at the same time. I did not have words for it. I just knew I wanted to hear it again immediately. The Outsiders were from Cleveland. And here's the thing about that. They weren't some overnight British invasion copycat band. The guys who became the Outsiders had been grinding away in the Cleveland scene since 1958, back when a 15-year-old guitarist named Tom King started an R&B outfit called the Starfires. 7 years of bar gigs before anybody outside Ohio knew their name. And here is the part I did not know until I started digging. Tom King wrote Time Won't Let Me with his brother-in-law Chet Kelly. They cut it in September of 1965 at Cleveland Recording. On their own dime, for a tiny label owned by King's uncle. They weren't waiting for permission, they just made the record. Capitol Records heard it and signed the band on the strength of that one song. But the label wanted the name changed. And the new name came out of something ugly. King had walked away from his uncle's label, and his uncle accused him of being an outsider to the family. He took the insult and put it on the record sleeve. January 1966. It goes to number 5 in the country. Over 1 million copies sold. And I love this part. When Cleveland's Wixie signed on as a rock station that spring, they put the local boys at number 1, ahead of the Beatles. In their own town, they beat the Beatles. Some records don't just sound good, they sound like Getting Out. That's what that horn line is. That's 7 years of Tuesday nights finally paying for itself. And listen, there is a voice on this record. Sonny Geraci. Remember that name. Because we are going to hear from him again on this list, and when we get there, it is going to change how you hear both songs, I promise you that. And the next one is a number 1 hit that only exists because a guy heard a Beatles lyric wrong. Number 9, Judy in Disguise, with Glasses. John Fred and his Playboy Band, 1968. Okay, I love this story. I have told this story at parties to people who did not ask. John Fred Gourier hears Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds for the first time, and what he hears is Lucy in Disguise with Diamonds.
Keep wearing your bracelets.
And he thinks it's brilliant. He thinks the Beatles are the cleverest people alive for coming up with that. Then he looks at the sleeve, and it isn't that at all. He said he was totally disappointed. And I know you know this feeling. You love a line in a song, you find out it was never the line, and it's like a small bereavement. Most of us just move on. He didn't. He wrote the song he thought he'd heard. He and bandmate Andrew Bernard built it out in a small studio in Tyler, Texas. Strings, brass, sitar, piano, breathing sounds, the whole psychedelic kitchen sink. And here's the part that gets me. The rest of the band hated it. They thought they were a respectable R&B outfit and this nonsense was beneath them. Fred pushed it through anyway. January 1968. It goes to number 1 in America, and what it knocked out of the top spot was Hello Goodbye by the Beatles. A guy mishears the Beatles, writes a song about mishearing the Beatles, and the song beats the Beatles. You just smiled. I know you did, because I did the same thing when I found it. And Lennon loved it.
without sense.
Fred said that when they met, it was the first thing Lennon brought up. He thought it was great, and joked that he'd go home and write one called Froggy in a Pond with Spectacles. That's the whole 60s in one anecdote, isn't it? The accident and the icon shaking hands. Let's look at the numbers. Only 9% of you are actually subscribed. Honestly, that's tough to see. Our team spends days hunting down archives and verifying every single fact just to tell these stories right. If you've made it this far into the video, you're clearly part of the community, so please hit subscribe. It costs nothing and helps us immensely. Now, for those already subscribed, very few of you have made the jump to our membership, and that's a hard pill to swallow because you're the ones who know our value best. If this channel has moved you or inspired you, consider joining. It's the price of one coffee, but it's the literal fuel for this channel. Let's keep this alive together. Back to the story. Number 8, Green Tambourine, The Lemon Pipers, 1968. That echo. The way the vocal sounds like it's coming up out of a well. I was too young to know what a sitar was, and I knew something strange was happening in that record. The Lemon Pipers were college kids out of Oxford, Ohio. Blues, hard rock, folk rock, a few Birds and Who covers. They played the bars around Cincinnati. That was the band they thought they were. My green tambourine. Then they signed to Buddha, the bubblegum label, home of Yummy Yummy Yummy, and Buddha told them what they were going to record. Their singer Ivan Brown remembered sitting in a New York office thinking to himself that he didn't want to record these songs, and he had to record them anyway, because that's how it worked. Green Tambourine was written by Paul Lecca and Shelley Pins. Lecca produced it too, not the band. Drop a dime before I walk away. Bartlett and Brown called it saccharine pop and worse, and avoided playing it live when they could get away with it. February 1968. Number 1 on the Hot 100, 1 million copies. Buddha's first chart topper, and by most reckonings the first bubblegum number 1 there ever was. Here's where it turns. Money feeds my music machine. Their guitarist was a man named Bill Bartlett. The Pipers fell apart in '69, and Bartlett went off and formed a band called Starstruck. While he was in it, he took a Leadbelly song that ran less than a minute, rearranged it, and put it out himself on a tiny label. My green tambourine. Producers heard it, built a band around him, called it Ram Jam, and re-released it in 1977. Number 18. That song was Black Betty. The guy from the Tambourine record made Black Betty. I sat with that for about 10 minutes when I found it. And remember that name, Paul Lecca, the man who wrote this one. He is coming back on this list, and what he does next is even stranger than this. Number 7, Sky Pilot, Eric Burdon and the Animals, 1968.
And we hope it doesn't offend anybody. It shouldn't offend anybody.
This is the one where I have to tell you something. This record scared me a little. Still does. It opens with Burdon singing alone in silence. No band, just the voice. And the Sky Pilot of the title isn't a pilot at all. It's slang for a military chaplain, the man who blesses the boys before they go.
The boys as they stand in line.
Then the middle happens. Bagpipes, gunfire, dive bombers, distorted guitar, reverb, horns, woodwinds, piccolos. One of the first genuinely cinematic records in rock. Nobody had put that on a 45 before. The pipes were real. Burdon tape recorded the Royal Scots Dragoon Guards at a school and dropped them into the middle of the song.
All that he can to make them feel warm.
And Songfacts has it that the British government sent him an angry letter over his use of the pipe music. I want you to sit with the size of that. A rock singer made an anti-war record so effective that a government wrote him a complaint about the bagpipes. It ran 7 minutes and 27 seconds. So when they put it out as a single, they cut it in half and put part 1 on the A side and part 2 on the B side. You had to get up and flip the record over to hear the end of the song. In the middle of a war record, about soldiers. It reached number 14 anyway.
The smell of gun grease and their bayonets thick.
And because of the length, it never got the airplay the other protest songs got. The best rock music doesn't ask permission to get inside you, it just does. And this one got in and stayed. And after this, I want to tell you about a #1 hit by a band that did not exist at all. Number 6. Na Na Hey Hey, Kiss Him Goodbye. Steam, 1969. You know this one. We all know this one. You have sung it at a ball game. But sit with me for a minute, because where it came from is going to make it sound completely different on the other side. Remember Paul Lecca, the man who wrote Green Tambourine? A year after that hit, he's working at Mercury with an old friend named Gary DiCarlo, cutting singles for him. They need a B-side, just a throwaway for the back of the record. Because why would you put two good songs on one single? Their old bandmate Dale Frashuer suggests an unfinished thing the three of them had kicked around back in 1961, called Kiss Him Goodbye. The song had no chorus, so Lecca wrote one, and rather than bother with actual words, he filled the space with nanas. The session starts at 7 at night and finishes at 5 in the morning. There isn't a single guitar on the record. Piano, organ, vibes, and a looped drum track. Lecca's own verdict on it later was that it was an embarrassing record. Not because DiCarlo sang it badly, but because next to his real songs it was an insult. The A&R man heard it and made it the A-side. And because DiCarlo had a solo career being planned, they couldn't put his name on it, so they invented a band. Lecca had seen steam coming up out of a manhole outside the studio. That was the name. Steam wasn't a band. The guys pictured on the sleeve had nothing to do with the song. Models were sent out to tour it, lip-syncing DiCarlo's vocal. December 1969. 2 weeks at #1. The Throwaway. By the band that didn't exist, sung by a man whose name wasn't on it. And I know what you're thinking right now, because I thought it too. That song has outlived almost everything on the charts around it. 50-some years of stadiums. From a 5 in the morning B-side nobody believed in. Number 5. Ride, Captain Ride, Blues Image, 1970. That electric piano intro. 15 seconds of it before anybody sings a word. And I have spent a genuinely embarrassing portion of my life wondering who those 73 men were. So has everybody else. People went digging through history books looking for the voyage. Some folks were sure it was Francis Drake in 1579. Sailors in Vietnam had their own theory about a collision in the South China Sea.
'Cause they were too busy watching those old raindrops fall.
Other people were convinced it was the Pueblo. Mike Panera sat down at the Rhodes electric piano. It was a Model 73. 73 keys. That's it. That's the whole answer. Panera said he calmed his mind, started hearing music, sat down at the piano, and needed a first word. And what came into his head was 73. He liked the rhythm of it, and the song wrote itself from there. The band needed one more track for the album. He wrote it on the spot. And the Rhodes wasn't even the keyboard players. Skip Conte was the keyboardist, but the instrument belonged to Panera, the singer and guitarist. It went to number 4 in the US. Their only top 40 hit, ever. And by the time it peaked, Blues Image had already broken up. Panera went to Iron Butterfly. Conte went to Three Dog Night. They never even got to enjoy it together. And I know how this sounds, but stay with me. I think the song is better now that I know. Because a man in a room, out of ideas, looked down at a keyboard and pulled a whole ghost ship out of the number of keys in front of him. That's not less romantic. That's the most rock and roll thing on this entire list. Number 4. Signs, 5-man electrical band, 1971. This is the one I have been waiting to get to, because everybody thinks they know this song, and almost nobody knows it nearly didn't happen. Les Emerson wrote it driving Route 66 back to Los Angeles from Canada. Irritated by the billboards blocking his view of the actual country. And the line about being turned away from work, that came from friends of his who'd been refused jobs for no reason other than how they looked. In 1970, it came out as the B-side of a single called Hello Melinda Goodbye. That single died, number 55 in Canada, nothing in America. Their song about being shut out was, itself, Shut Out, on the back of a flop. Then the disc jockeys started flipping the record over and playing the other side. By 1971, the band was close to breaking up entirely when their new label reissued Signs as the lead single. Emerson found out it was happening because an old friend working as a DJ in Norfolk, Virginia called him up to say the record was exploding and could the band come play a festival. He got there and the crowd stretched to the horizon, singing his words back at him. Number 3 in the US. Number 4 in Canada. Over 2 million copies sold worldwide. And then in 1990, Tesla cut it live and acoustic and took it back into the top 10 all over again. Some of you just leaned forward. That is exactly the right reaction. Because think about what almost happened. If one disc jockey doesn't turn that 7-inch over, this song does not exist for us. There is no anthem. There is no Tesla version. There's a band from Ottawa that quit in 1971, and you never hear the name. I think about that more than is probably healthy. Number 3. One Toke Over the Line. Brewer and Shipley, 1971. Okay, I love this part. This might be my favorite true story in all of American music. Mike Brewer told the story of where the title came from. They were playing a little club in Kansas City, multiple sets a night, and stepped outside before the last one for what he called a breath of fresh air. They came back in and Tom Shipley said he was one toke over the line. Brewer thought it was hysterical. That's it. That's the origin. A joke between two tired guys behind a bar. Then the Vice President of the United States, Spiro Agnew, lumped it in with 8 Miles High and White Rabbit and called it drug culture propaganda that threatened to sap the national strength. The duo says he leaned on the FCC to get it off the air right as it was peaking, and they ended up on Nixon's enemies list. 2 folk singers from Missouri, on the enemies list, next to actual politicians. And now here's the other half. In that exact same stretch of 1971, the song was performed on The Lawrence Welk Show, the most wholesome, conservative, family hour program on American television, sung by Gail Farrell and Dick Dale. And at the end of it, with no trace of irony whatsoever, Welk turned to the camera and described what the audience had just heard as a modern spiritual. Brewer's own summary was that the vice president named them personally as subversive to American youth, while, at exactly the same time, Lawrence Welk was performing the thing on television and introducing it as a gospel song. And as he put it, they got more publicity than they could ever have paid for. This is the one I mentioned back at the start of the list, and I told you, it changes the song. You will never hear that record the same way again, neither will I. And number 2 is the payoff I promised you at the very beginning. The voice comes back. Number 2, Precious and Few, Climax, 1972. 2 minutes and 43 seconds of the softest record on this entire list, and I need to tell you who is singing it. It's Sonny Geraci, the same voice from Time Won't Let Me. Number 10, the horns, the 12-string, the Cleveland Kid hollering over a garage rock stomp in 1966. Same man, 6 years later. The Outsiders had come apart. There was a lawsuit over who owned the band's name, and Tom King won it in 1970. So Geraci left with guitarist Walter Nims and keyboardist Nick D'Amico and started something new in Los Angeles. Nims wrote Precious and Few, and the record almost didn't get out. The producer Larry Cox pushed them to re-record it and pushed Geraci to lean into the big ballad. Then nothing happened. It sat in the Bell Records archive for months, until an executive happened to hear it playing on a Santa Barbara radio station and pulled it back out. They tested it in Hawaii 6 months before the mainland ever heard it. Then Buffalo. Then Boston. Week ending February 26, 1972. Number 3 in the country. Which means Sonny Geraci did something almost nobody in the history of the charts has done. A top 5 hit with one band, and then a top 5 hit with a completely different band. As he described the first one himself, Mersey meets Motown. And the second one couldn't have been more different. It was the last time he was a national presence. He drifted out of the business around 1980, went into the family home improvement company, and eventually came back around on the oldies circuit. He'd play both songs in the same set, the garage rocker and the ballad. He died in February of 2017, at 69. I told you we'd come back to him. And I think the two records together are one of the quietest, most complete little stories in American pop. The kid who screamed to get out of Cleveland, and the man who came back 6 years later and whispered, Number 1. Incense and Peppermints. The Strawberry Alarm Clock, 1967. That organ line. That's the sound of a specific year. You hear 4 seconds of it and you know exactly where you are. Here's what was actually happening in that room. In 1967, the band was still called The Sixpence. They were recording a single called The Birdman of Alcatraz. They needed a B-side, so Mark Weitz and guitarist Ed King put together an instrumental. Their producer, Frank Slay, sent the instrumental off to a songwriter friend named John Carter, who wrote lyrics for it, and then turned up at the studio to oversee them being sung. Nobody in the band wrote those words. And the writing credit went to Carter and his partner Tim Gilbert. The band did not take that well. They didn't like the lyrics, they didn't like the maneuvering, and their singers refused to perform them. There was a 16-year-old friend of theirs standing in the studio watching the session, a kid named Greg Munford, who sang in another group. He was there to do harmonies, he ended up singing lead. It came out as a B-side. A music director at Kist in Santa Barbara flipped it over and played it like it was the biggest record in the country, and it went to number 1 regionally. Munford remembers driving into the California hills after school, dropping the single off at small stations, because that's how it worked. You started a record in Bakersfield and Fresno, and the signal carried to Santa Barbara, and Santa Barbara carried to LA November 25th, 1967, number 1 in America. Gold record for 1 million copies the following month. So let's be clear about what that record is. The band didn't write the words, they didn't get the credit. Weitz's account is that he and Ed King were cut out of their share and never saw a dime, that he wanted to sue, and was talked out of it because it would have cost the band their touring bookings. He tried again 2 years later. Then the band broke up in 1970, and the cost of the case ended it. And the 16-year-old never joined the group and never sang it on stage with them. He's spent decades since living quietly, and his own line about it is that he had his 15 minutes. And here's Weitz all these years later saying that without Greg Munford's vocal, the song never would have made it. That his voice fit perfectly, that they all tried and none of them sounded right, and that the kid deserves a lot of credit. The man who got cut out of the money still made sure to say that. That's the one that gets me, not the lawsuit.